Aikido is a modern Japanese martial art developed by Morihei Ueshiba, referred to as O-sensei or great teacher by students in the art. In Aikido, rather than blocking and counterattacking, one blends with the direction of an attack and uses the attacker's momentum to unbalance them. Aikido, therefore, is essentially defensive and evasive, focused on self-defense rather than fighting. Aikido has been under attack for 2 decades by critics who fail to understand how the art functions for self-defense, the benefits of the cooperative training process in Aikido, much less the higher purposes of the art. The first wave of these attacks came from those associated with so-called internal martial arts, who sought to co-opt Aikido given its popularity at the time. They claim that post-war Aikido is a watered-down version of O-sensei's art, but that they possess the long-lost secrets of O-sensei's power. As videos of Aikido of varying quality spread on the internet, a second wave of attacks on Aikido emerged. Social media content creators ridiculed the art as ineffective and even faked. Judging Aikido through the lens of competitive combat sports, these critics insisted that resistance and sparring are the only appropriate ways to train in any martial art, and fighting the only way to measure the self-defense value of an art. In recent years, the face of these attacks has been Rokas, of the Martial Arts Journey YouTube channel. Describing himself as an Aikido master, despite a truncated training history, he attracted millions of viewers after losing a light sparring match with a professional mixed martial arts fighter. Presented as the living proof that Aikido is a fake martial art, he is the center of an increasingly coordinated effort among content creators who profit by ridiculing the art while simultaneously claiming to be making it functional by recreating Aikido in the image of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. These critics embolden and encourage a mob of mean-spirited commenters on any Aikido content uploaded to the internet. There is an emerging third wave of attacks on Aikido that combines the mistaken notion that O-sensei learned the techniques of Aikido in China with the claim that Aikido is an ineffective martial art. These critics advocate for recreating Aikido in the image of the Chinese arts they believe it was watered down from. One example of these critics is Jerry, from the Fight Commentary Breakdowns YouTube channel, who claims the Kotegaeshi technique in Aikido is an ineffective version of a technique taken from Chinese wrestling.
So this is called 弹拧子. It means flick the screw. For those of you who do Aikido or Aiki Jiu-Jitsu, doesn't this kind of look like a Kotegaeshi? Now, if you watch it again, you'll see there's a foot aspect of it that you don't have in Kotegaeshi.
Though framed as a question, he soon reveals that his mind is already made up as to the alleged Chinese origins of Kotegaeshi.
He's saying this is a very hard technique. I think that's the first difference between this and Kotegaeshi. From my understanding, in Rokas or anyone else that does Aikido, correct me, Kotegaeshi is kind of a basic technique in Aikido, right? It's one of the first probably 6 or 7 techniques you learn in Aikido. But from this guy's Chinese ancient version of Kotegaeshi, it's not an easy technique.
Despite noting the differences in the techniques, he nonetheless refers to it as a Chinese ancient version of Kotegaeshi. By calling Aikido basic, what he means here is less sophisticated and less effective.
So he is having the uke grab his wrist, right? Which a lot of Aikido attacks start to.
It's strange to jump to these conclusions because both techniques involve the wrist. He could just as easily have concluded that Kotegaeshi was taken from any number of martial arts that also have wrist techniques. At any rate, the history of Aikido is well known. O-sensei combined the techniques of Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, and in particular traditional Daito-ryu, with the movement and timing of Japanese weapons arts, along with the insights of his spiritual beliefs. Even those with agendas to claim that O-sensei's power derived from ancient Chinese origins, which he somehow failed to transmit to his direct students or even his son, recognized that he did not learn the techniques in China, in part because he wasn't there very long, but largely because the techniques of Daito-ryu predate his birth. To speculate that there might be ancient Chinese influences on all of these arts, or Indian influences on Chinese arts, has little relevance to the comparison Jerry is making. In reality, the way these techniques work is very different. In Aikido, Kotegaeshi is a whole body throw. It starts by blending with the movement of the initial attack to lead uke off balance. After this, uke is kept off balance by using their momentum, their desire to continue to attack, and by generating centrifugal force. At the moment of throwing, uke is completely off balanced, and the wrist twist shapes the direction of the fall, rather than forcing the fall. It is not a traditional pain compliance wrist lock. In the Chinese wrestling technique, however, the opponent is leveraged off balance and ultimately thrown with the aid of a tripping leg kick or sweep. The Japanese origins of Kotegaeshi are also confirmed by examining the traditional Daito-ryu version of the technique. While most Daito-ryu techniques involve less movement and work largely by threatening the joints, Kotegaeshi is a technique in Daito-ryu that utilized more of an attacker's momentum, and in this way was already closer to the Aikido version. Jerry is so fast to conclude that the techniques of Aikido must have Chinese origins, because he holds the preconceived notion that Aikido is an ineffective martial art. The failure to grasp how Kotegaeshi functions results from the same bias. It colors his observations. In fact, he can barely contain his disdain for Aikido.
The flick, the tan, is both a kick and a wrist drag. I know Aikido purists are going to be like, dude, it's not Kotegaeshi, dude, that's the Aikido. In Aikido, and I think that's why Aikido fails a lot, is because you're relying on one little thing to both connect and control someone's center to then do whatever, whether manipulate them or take them down. What you see in this Shrideout tutorial is you have more than one major lever, especially when he also grabbed the collar. He gave himself 3 lever points to connect to the center and take someone down.
Jerry comes close to understanding how the Chinese wrestling technique works, though he refers to the flick as a wrist drag, when clearly the instructor was teaching something much more sophisticated than that. He fails completely, however, in the case of Aikido, to recognize how the technique works. In the Aikido Kotegaeshi, we don't use the wrist to connect to the center and leverage someone down. We lead them off balance, keep them off balance, add to their unbalancing with weight shifting and centrifugal force, and shape them down by using this momentum. How the Kotegaeshi technique works is plainly evident in videos of quality Aikido, and herein lies another reason for these errors. Jerry is relying on both the explanations and examples by Rokas of how to do Aikido techniques. Rokas suffers from a mechanical understanding of Aikido. He was trained in a version of Aikido that lacked committed attacks, connection, or martial awareness. where the momentum and intentions of uke were not utilized, where uke was not truly off-balanced, but rather simply complied, and where nage did not throw with power. Moreover, this style has increasingly infused Aikido, literally, with interpretive dance. Recognizing that this approach to Aikido was lacking in terms of self-defense application, rather than addressing his lack of Aiki, Rokas sought to go to the opposite extreme, struggling over techniques and attempting to force them through leverage. In both instances, however, before and now, his understanding of Aikido was mechanical, with Nage imposing their will on uke rather than using their momentum. One thing is clear: if one truly wants to understand how Aikido works, much less the psychological and spiritual benefits of the cooperative training process, they should not ask Rokas, or rely on the biased perspectives of the competitive fighters he seeks out in his misguided effort to fix the art. Given the concept of Takimuso Aiki, it is possible to incorporate the insights of any number of martial arts into Aikido, so long as the blending approach to Aiki, cooperative training process, and commitment to being merciful towards an attacker to the extent that one safely can are maintained. This exploration has been endorsed by Doshu Kishimaru Ueshiba, the son of O-sensei. In this video, Tatsutaka Sugawara-sensei, Uchideshi to O-sensei, demonstrates his Tai Chi-style Aikido forms. In the case of the Japanese and Chinese arts, the history of mutual influences, as well as the similarities and differences, have been studied in a scholarly manner. In this video, Sugawara-sensei demonstrates his use of Chinese influences in partnered techniques in Aikido. Notice how he incorporates the uprooting power from Chinese arts without abandoning either the Hamni stance or the movement principles of Aikido.
2, 3, 4. Then sinking. Okay? Then step in. Then sinking. Then this leg power. Current Aikido is a huge. Everyone. This is a flowing style. The basic style is a more triangular stance. From here, one, big turn, step in, let's be.
Once an attacker's intentions and momentum are no longer fueling the interaction, once techniques are imposed on uke by force or leverage, then they have become attempts at domination rather than Aiki. To claim that Aikido is a failed attempt to copy arts from an entirely different culture, on the one hand, or to claim that Aikido must be fixed by becoming an art that is close to its polar opposite, both in function and purpose, is deeply offensive. Moreover, both claims reveal profound ignorance. However effective such approaches may or may not be, and in what contexts, is irrelevant to this distinction. Though the problems with training grip fighting, struggle, and forcing techniques should be obvious, when compared to the preparation in Aikido for real-world attacks, multiple attack situations, and larger and stronger attackers. In short, Kotegaeshi is not Chinese. It is a technique modified from earlier Japanese martial arts by Morihei Ueshiba.